I want to invite you to join us as a church and join me in this room even on a journey through the book of the Bible. That is starting in the fall, we started a journey through 1st and 2nd Corinthians. So if you have a Bible, do me a favor, join me on a smartphone. But if you don't own a Bible, don't worry. There's a paper Bible in the tray of the chair in front of you. In fact, if notifications are not silenced and scrolling is a temptation for you, I would say don't use a smartphone. Maybe grab the paper Bible. Don't be afraid of the table of contents either. If this is maybe one of the first times that you've opened a Bible, notice that even the table of contents will help you get to where we're going. You'll see even a map of the journey through the Bible. That is, you'll find these two letters, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, written like the title of the letter suggests, to a church in Corinth by the Apostle Paul. It's a relatively young church, a new church. It probably hasn't been in existence for very long. And the Apostle Paul came to Corinth, which is at the crossroads of culture and geography and trade and commerce, to a growing city, but a kind of city that, because it's at the crossroads of culture and commerce, it's a transient city. That is, that people are coming in and out, they're on their way through, and you've heard me say this, you'll hear even more about it today, but you've heard me kind of compare it to what we would say is the modern day Vegas, right? The slogans that come around Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, because after all, if you're going to go to a place like that, there's kind of I'm not going to stay there. Who cares about my reputation or anyone knowing me? And that anonymity allows you to live a fairly morally loose life. That was the reputation of Corinth. In fact, centuries before this was written, the Greek goddess of love, there was a temple where people by the millions a year would come and they would flock to and make a journey to Corinth to worship the goddess of love, and they would worship by soliciting a prostitute. So, we find ourselves in a list of hot topics that the Apostle Paul is addressing in an interesting city for the gospel to begin to take root. These people were coming from different backgrounds, and most of them kind of a morally promiscuous, a morally permissive background, and they made their way, they've been changed by Jesus, but they're bringing a lot of their background, their own baggage into the story. This is in some sense a picture of a vibrant church where people are being changed from all walks of life, right? Just like Corinth, they thought they were kind of on their way through and not going to stay very long, and while they were there, God changed them. This is what I also believe about our church and movements of the gospel everywhere. Many of you are here in this city and you're here in this place. You did not think you were going to be here 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And yet, while you may have thought that you've made it to this place for one reason, I want to challenge you with the idea that God has another purpose. He can change you. He can change that story. So on the list of hot topics, he says that Jesus changes everything. There's nothing but Christ changes. And he said that I want you to know that when I came to you, I preached that and nothing else. Christ, that who Jesus is, what he's done, and what he will do changes everything. And it changes the way we see, as the last few weeks, it changes the way we see our relationships to celebrities, to power. That we saw in the last passage that people were making power moves by suing one another for money, rather than just being like, hey, I'm just going to give that to you, rather than taking the loss, like Jesus took the pain and loss in his own life and death. Rather than modeling Jesus, they were like, no, pay up, sucker, right? And before that, we saw that we hear a story of a man who was having a sexual relationship with his stepmom. And the church, rather than encourage, confronting and saying, hey, this doesn't really reflect Jesus, they were cowardly and even boasting about it. And so there were factions and divisions. It was an interesting place to be a part of. And so I'm going to begin in chapter 6. I'm going to start reading in verse 9. So you'll see the logic of his argument. First, as he says at the beginning of that chapter, for people that were suing one another in a way that doesn't reflect Jesus, after all, isn't it good that God didn't sue you? Isn't it God didn't go like, yeah, pay up? He said, no, I will pay. I will pay everything. So you'll see that as an introduction to verse 9, but we're going to spend our time in verses 12 through 20. So, have you had a nice, lighthearted sets of conversations since you've been here this morning? Got some light topics, right? Lighthearted exchange, right? Let's fix that. If you've already seen the caption, it says something like, flee sexual immorality, or maybe it'll say something like Christian freedom, right? That's nice. So here's my commitment for you. In a hot topic like this, here's my commitment. No matter how young or old you are, here's my commitment to this. This is not a hot topic insofar as it's new. Everyone's talking about this, and it's been happening for 2,000 years. And you'll see even in the passage why. So my commitment to you is this: I will be less graphic, I will be less explicit than a walk through the Sioux Empire Mall. I will be less graphic than the average commercial you see or ad you see, right? I will be less explicit than that. In fact, this might be a challenging topic. Even if you're a child or a student in the room, think of this: the Bible gives us language for how to talk about this, even for a young person, even a child. The very first story of the Bible tells us about the very first man and the woman, the very first husband and first wife, and it explains what the world, or what we'll see here, the topic of sex, but the way it describes it is that they knew one another. And so even the very first story, in a sense of a metaphor, but in reality, if someone wants to know, even a child, if you're like, what is sex? What is this whole thing? The Bible already tells us in the first few chapters, it's the most intimate way that a husband and wife can know one another. Not only that, but it's life-giving. That this intimate way of knowing is also the means by which every single human that exists has come to be. Every single person. If you're like, shh, don't talk about it. Well, the secret's out. Every one of you exists, even at the cellular level, because of some father and some mother. And so this isn't something we need to be afraid of, but instead, this is actually a gift. So, brace yourselves with me. I believe we can actually talk about this with deep conviction, you'll see in this passage, but we're doing so with conviction and not cruelty. And I know many of you, you probably already are like tensing up, and I get that, because even if you're a child in the room, here's what I would tell you is that the first time this conversation ever happened, the first conversation about physical intimacy ever happened, the people involved weren't wearing any clothes. And it didn't bother them at all. They did so with zero shame, like the discomfort that you feel now. This is what I want you to know. As God designed it, the first time this conversation took place, no one was tense. No one was embarrassed. In fact, this story gives us a picture of how what God has given as good, sin always distorts. Sin always corrupts. Worse, you'll see in this text even, it tells lies about it. And so here's what I would tell you. If in any given moment today or for the rest of your life, if even the topic of physical intimacy, if it ever in that topic you feel uncomfortable, I just want you to hear me. You forget everything I say. Anytime you feel that discomfort, shame, that's what sin does. That's what sin does. About any topic that brings shame or guilt or condemnation, that's what sin does. It takes something good, something that you ought to be able to experience and converse about openly. Sin corrupts. And yet here's the picture you'll see as well. What God has intended and created, good, and what sin corrupts, Jesus is able to redeem and restore. So, beginning in verse 9 of chapter 6, follow along with me. Or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you. But you were washed. You were sanctified. You were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of our God. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. Food is meant for the stomach, and the stomach for food, and God will destroy both one and the other. The body is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord. And the Lord for the body. And God raised the Lord and will also raise us up by his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For as it is written, the two shall become one flesh. But he who is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with him. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. A close friend of mine, a mentor of mine, helped me when he pointed out that most of us will make it through life, particularly the challenges of life, but you'll kind of endure life with one of two things, with either a high view of God or a high view of yourself. Especially in adversity and difficulty, you will make it through difficult situations by turning to and hoping in a high view of who God is, His plan, His purpose, His will, His kindness, right? Or you will turn in adversity to a high view of yourself, right? I can fix this, or even we're like, I messed this all up, or I can make it right. Here's a hotter take for you that'll intentionally offend some of you. Again, from a friend of mine, I learned this. There is what I would call dog theology, and then there's cat theology. Here's what I mean. A dog, right? A dog looks at its surroundings and says to itself, I have a warm bed to sleep in. I have food and water in bowls ready. I have toys to play with, and I have a roof over my shoulder. My master must be amazing. A cat, on the other hand, says, I have a warm bed to sleep in. I have food and water to drink. I have toys and things to entertain myself with. I have a roof over my own head. I must be amazing. Now, if you think that's offensive, I apologize. I'm just shaped by Hollywood, right? From Lassie to Rin Tin Tin to, they even make Bud, dogs who play basketball. The list goes on and on. Even Flipper, the dolphin, had a show. So before you hate me, when they make a movie called Mittens about a cat who saves people's lives and like sniffs out drugs and money and that kind of stuff and bombs and whatnot, I'll change my tune and I'll retract my statement. Until then, that's a helpful picture. And the Apostle Paul is saying that when you see sexual pleasure, when you think about physical desires, your first thought is not, how good must God be? How great and gracious must He be? What a beautiful gift that reflects Him, and I'll glorify Him. No, when you see the gift of sexual pleasure, they think, well, it must be for me. This must be all about me. And I want you to have clarity here. You can face the difficulties of life, but you can also face the gifts. You can face certain things with a high view of God or a high view of yourself, right? You can look at the gift and think, wow, what a good and merciful God. How can I enjoy this gift in a way that glorifies my master? Or you can look at the gift and, I started licking my hands, like, you get the idea. Aren't I great? This gift must be for me and I can do whatever I want with it. You get it? He says, you think sex is about you. You think it's about you when in fact, did you hear? It's about God. In fact, I would say to you in this room that maybe if these topics don't particularly pertain to you, I think you'll still be equipped by it. I think you'll still be helped by it. But you can, in the place of physical intimacy here as a topic, you can replace it with anything you can think of. Work, achievement, approval, family, singleness, marriage. Pick anything you can think of. And he's saying, you think that's about you. You think that's meant for you. When in fact, it's all about God. It's for His glory. It's about what God has designed and created it to be. It's about how sin distorts it and perverts it. And primarily, as you see in this text, by telling lies about it. And it's about how Jesus redeems and restores it. It's about how Jesus will return and resurrect all of his people to never know that distortion ever again. So whether you come at this, like me, as more a part of the problem than the solution, this topic brings up a ton of embarrassment. I'm one of the many people almost ruined my life with sexual sin. I hate that. There's something in me that wishes I was like a drug dealer or a murderer, right? There's something in me that's like, oh, well, that's a cool, there's something shameful and just embarrassing about it. Or maybe you're on the more prudish end and you're wondering, like, why are all these chapters about this? And what he says to you and to me, this is not about you. There's something about the character of God on display. We regularly take something that's good that God made and we mess it up. That's what sin does. It takes good things and then turns them into sources of pain and destruction. And what was designed to be life-giving, quite literally, can be one of the most destructive forces known to humanity. So the Corinthians are misusing the good gift. And they even are touting in some ways slogans about it. They're kind of proud of it. You see Paul beginning by quoting that. And he tells us a few things. I'll walk through as many of them as I can. But the body, 1, belongs to the Lord. 2, it will be raised. 3 is united, a member of Christ. That language of member, like a body part, with Christ. 4 is now one spirit with the Spirit of God. 5 is now the Spirit's temple, its sacred dwelling place. And 6, it's been bought with a price. It's been purchased. It has worth and value. Therefore, he says, the church must not tolerate sexual immorality. That word there used is the word porneia. It's a large category in this Greek word that basically includes everything outside of an intimate, covenantal, physical relationship between a husband and a wife. Joined together, right? 2 shall become 1. That's the language of, as Jesus would even quote in the Gospel of Matthew, what God has joined together, think God's design, God's purpose, let no one separate. No one. And here's the beauty, is that we are now able to glorify God with our body. Even, for some of you, this might be the most encouraging thing, in the place where there is a history of shame and pain. I can't help but think that for most people, this topic is difficult because in this room, 1, you don't think you have hope. You don't really think there's a future for you. You don't really think God has something good in mind for you. Or 2, you really hate your life. You hate your own body. And I want you to see here, that's not new. In fact, that's what sin makes us all feel at one time or another. We don't really have a future, and we hate the life or body that we currently have. Join the club. That's what sin does. So, my hope is that as we even tackle difficult topics like this one, I told you that from the beginning, that we would have a titanium spine, have real conviction. There really is something good and bad. There really is something beautiful and ugly when we talk about this. But I want you to have a tender heart about it. Do you hear where he doesn't just say, hey, all you who have a lot of shame and a lot of you who don't fit in this area, boy, just get out, go away. What does he say? Oh, no, I want you to know. That's who you used to be. Let me tell you what Christ has purchased you to be. So in the past few sections even, maybe some of you, like when we hear the story of a man who has a relationship with his stepmother, you probably fall into 2 categories. Some of you are appalled by that someone would do that. But maybe the other half of you are probably appalled that the church would exercise discipline on him and say, that is wrong. That does not reflect God's good character and his good creation. So if you zoom out even to the picture of marriage, the picture of physical intimacy there from the very beginning, the very first story the Bible tells us that God gives to the world to reveal his character is he makes people in his image and he makes them different, very different. And the very first story that's told, while everything is good, God made the sun, the moon, the stars, the days, the night, the ocean, everything. And every single day, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. And we'll say more about this next week, but the one time that God gets to the end of the day and says, that's not good, is when he says it's not good that this man should be alone. And God introduces himself as the God that he is. He's the one who makes whole things that are incomplete. He's the one who repairs things that seem to be missing. And he offers man and woman with no shame, with the ability to give and bring life, to multiply that image, the beauty of God, and multiply it across the face of the earth. But sin distorts it. Sin corrupts it. And just when you think sin can't do any more damage, that God would have surely, well, that's enough of that. Like, that was a bad idea. Ephesians 5 tells us that the story changes. The Gospel of Matthew tells it as well. And the Apostle John says that I've come to prepare the way for what? The bridegroom. And the picture of redemption, just like the picture of creation, is what? It's a marriage. To where one day, if you skip to the end of the book, which I encourage you to do, you read the last few chapters of the book, the entirety of all things being restored. It's not you and I floating on clouds like Cupid shooting arrows. Maybe we'll do that. I don't really know. It doesn't say that, but it says that we will all be gathered around the presence of God in what? A wedding feast. A wedding feast. So it's not an accident. It's something beautiful here. And I want to challenge you. It sets what I would say is maybe the highest standard for sex and marriage and gender, singleness. It sets the highest and most beautiful standard for these things, and yet also tells us that you don't need them to be satisfied. It has the highest view of sex and marriage, and yet think about it, the highest expression of humanity was a man by the name of Jesus who did neither. So, first thing he does, Paul is dismantling the misleading and lying slogans of the day. It's a helpful logic for us to follow. Corinth apparently had slogans. Most commentarians believe those very first phrases. We started to read, all things are lawful for me. This is where, and I'm not being clever when I say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I would just think, what's a slogan? And I think there are many, right? Short phrases that would have felt obvious to them. He doesn't even quote them, right? The people reading it would have immediately known, like, oh, I know that one. They would have immediately known that he doesn't even have to quote it. He's like, like Aristotle said. He just assumes everyone knows it. And they did. It might have even been that they were telling this to Paul in the letter that they wrote to him. Essentially, right? I can do whatever I want. And the slogans reveal a kind of freedom that they were experiencing apart from and without the lordship of Jesus. An appetite without purpose or meaning. And like a spirituality without an embodiment. And Paul's response anchors everything back to Christ. Look, the body is for Christ, and Christ is for your body. The body belongs to Christ, and the body will be raised by Christ and united to Christ forever. Here's just a few that came to mind. Think about the slogans of our day if the Apostle Paul was writing to us. Slogans about autonomy and freedom, right? Like the all things are lawful for me. My body, my choice. Which is really fascinating if you just look at it, right? Whether you're if you're pro-abortion or you're like anti-vaxxing and asking or anti-masks, you have the same logic. You guys should get together and talk about that. My body, my choice. Figure that out. Good luck. You do you. No one gets to tell me what to do with my body. As long as it feels right. I'm not hurting anyone. Freedom means no limits. Consent is the only rule. My favorite one personally, you only live once, which is true if you're going to hell. I'm not funny. Don't. I don't need your pity. It's not funny. Here's a common one I've heard my entire life. I was born this way. And what they assume is that freedom equals autonomy, right? Think cat, dog. They see it and go like, this is good. It must be for me. It has to be for me. It has to be about me. Who could tell me it's not about me? And the self then is the highest authority. And your desire justifies whatever you do with it. And limits are oppressive. Here's a few more about appetite. Right? He says food is meant for the quote is, food is meant for the stomach and stomach for food. Like if I desire it, there's no reason I shouldn't have it. Here's maybe the modern equivalents I've heard. I have needs. Right? It's only biological. It's just chemistry. Everyone has urges. We're all just animals. It's natural. It's no different than hunger. And what they assume is that the body has no spiritual meaning, that life has no real purpose. Sex is just a function. It's not a covenant. And the body's just temporary and disposable. Desire is its own morality. Think of the quotes of casualization, of the consequence denial you hear in some of these slogans, right? Have you ever heard these phrases to describe this kind of intimacy? No strings attached. Friends with benefits. It doesn't mean anything, just having fun. It's only sex. It's, even think of the euphemisms that come along with it. Hooking up. Swiping right. Netflix and chill slid into my DMs. Like, again, I don't want to like lead you down some sort of sinful creativity in your own mind, but it's everywhere. If the Apostle Paul was right, he would. That's how he would lead. He would jump in with this. Don't catch the feelings, and what they assume that sex does not form bonds. That it doesn't actually have, think bodies can be separated from their souls. And intimacy without commitment is sustainable. You can just keep doing it. That union without covenant is harmless. And we saw this at the end of the book of Hebrews. If this is the case, then the physical intimacy between a husband and wife is like glue. It's like wood glue. And you know this if you've ever worked in carpentry. You stick wood glue between two pieces of wood. If you ever remove them, you cannot remove them without also destroying both pieces of wood. Same thing is true. Think about the identity-defining slogans that Paul would probably confront. Sexuality is who I am. I am my desires. You can't change who I am. To deny this urge is to deny who I am. And authenticity, deep, my truest self, means expressing these desires. And what they all assume is that desire equals identity. That self-expression equals authenticity. And restraint is a self-betrayal. It's a denial of our deepest self. Identity precedes then. They also have slogans about love without definition, right? You can hear them saying like, hey, I can desire this, right? I can do whatever I want with this. I desire this, right? Stomach made for food, food for stomach. If I want it, it must be okay. If I love it, if I'm after it, it must be okay. Again, this is a distortion. You might hear this even in our own day. Love is love. Right? If you really love someone, it can't be wrong. Follow your heart. Love always wins. And all those assume that love has no moral shape. That commitment is optional. Holiness is irrelevant, and God has no power over love. Think of the therapeutic slogans that the Apostle Paul would address around this topic. This is healing for me. I need this for my mental health. This helps me cope. This is a part of my journey. And what all of those slogans assume is that desire equals therapy or healing. That holiness is repression. Think of the anti-judgment slogans that he would be addressing as people are confronting this, right? Do not judge. Who are you to say? Who are you to say on this particular thing? That's your truth. Or stop shaming people, which is a weird way of shaming people who are shaming people, evidently. You're on the wrong side of history. And what all of these assume is that moral disagreement equals hatred. That moral disagreement is not, in fact, love. Hey, if you run in front of that traffic, it will harm you. Like, who are you to shame me for that? That's not helpful. And correction is harm, or worse, correction is violence. And all of those assume that God has no authority over your desire. Slogans like, I belong to myself, my body is mine, I answer to no one, I'm a sovereign citizen, right? And Paul's countercultural claim is, you are not your own. You were bought with a price, your body's for the Lord, now glorify Him with that. So think of it this way. Paul exposes what those kinds of cheap slogans always do. They offer a kind of freedom that seems tempting without lordship. They offer a spirituality that's detached from the body. And they offer an idea of like an appetite or satisfaction without any meaning or purpose. These are the earliest heresies of the Christian church. Next thing I want you to see is that people then are more shaped by the world than by Jesus. That was his confrontation. You're quoting, I love this, the way I say it usually if I'm talking to you or someone else, is like cite your source. Like cite your source. Where'd you hear that? I can think of several I've heard in my life. It's just people who were like, I've watched the destruction of a marriage right in front of me many times, and I've heard on more than one occasion someone saying something like, well, I love him, but I'm not in love with him. And I'm like, oh, and they said it like they were citing like an expert or the Bible. And it's like, hey, where'd you hear that? Right? That's probably from a Friends episode. And so notice, he's saying, look, if your sources you cite are of the world and of the flesh, beware. Beware. If they're your ultimate authority, you're headed for destruction. Because that means ultimately you're taking something that God meant for a particular purpose and you're using it, maybe you don't mean to, as a weapon or something that will harm you and others. So look what he offers. Freedom without the lordship of Jesus is just the new slavery. Listen to his retort. He says, look, all things are lawful. But then his retort is, but I'm not going to be dominated by anything. Right? You say you can do whatever you want, but just notice that will dominate you. Think of it this way. Sin always feels like freedom until you try to stop it for good. Right? If that's the language of addiction, right? If you're in this room like, sin's not a problem, then here's my challenge to you, okay? Here's my challenge. This is right out of the Sermon on the Mount. Be perfect. Never sin again. And then come back and just tell me what you discover. Tell me what you learn. Because sin always seems like, this is a good option. This is a better option. This is freedom. This is pleasure. It always promises that until you try to stop it. And then it becomes its own, right? Did you hear that? It dominates you. It says you can't live without this. You have to have this. So notice, even if it seems like freedom, without Jesus, it's just another kind of slavery. And the world says freedom means having no limits. And Paul says, no, freedom means having the right master. Look, you're always going to be mastered by something. The only question is whether or not it takes life away or it gives life. Next, notice, the body is not an appetite machine. The body is for the Lord. He says food is one of the other slogans. Food's meant for the stomach for food. God's going to destroy one or the other. Now, that God will destroy one or the other, most commentaries think that that's just another slogan. But if you'll notice in the translation, it's not in quotes. That's because the translation is trying to be consistent to the format of the actual Greek. But even if it is a quote of Paul, he's simply saying, he's not saying there's annihilation of the body. In fact, he literally the next three verses says, no, your body is going to be resurrected. All the way up to chapter 15 where he says that's the meaning of life. However, even whatever the case may be here is, he's saying that, whether it means that your desires will one day change, they will one day give way to new and better life, a new resurrected body. Either way, he's saying, look, God ultimately has created you with more meaning and purpose than you're giving him credit for. What you do now matters eternally. Here's what he says in the next verse. God will raise the body. And so the disagreement isn't about digestion. It's about the future that God has planned for you and for me. Food may fill a function, but he's saying here, sex forms a union. Physical intimacy paints a picture of the covenant love of God. Think of it this way. Sex is not merely consensual. Sex is covenantal. If you lower the standard to just consent, you've cheapened the very life-giving gift that God gives. And it's like, I have to get consent. No, you have to get covenant. This is the beauty, in fact. And so the Corinthians, in this case, chose pleasure in their earthly body over the resurrection of their earthly body. The resurrection will change everything. In fact, he says that the resurrection of Jesus is the lens through which you are to understand your body. Verse 14, and God raised the Lord, Jesus, and will also raise up us by his power. The resurrection changes everything. And they were choosing to believe that earthly pleasure was ultimate. But here's the problem, right? Now, the categories of porneia, the categories of sexual immorality, whatever they may be, it may be a desire for the same sex or desire for someone who's not your wife. And if you're not married at all, that's fornication. If you are married and you desire someone else's spouse, that's adultery. But notice, fornication, adultery, pornography, that's where that word porneia ends up working into English, which is a depiction of any of this kind of sexual immorality, right? Fornication, adultery, pornography, they seem great and they seem like they can help you with something until you're dead. When you are 6 feet under, where will you look for help and hope? And you'll realize they can't help you. They can't bring a dead body pleasure. In that moment, your only hope in life and death is Christ, nothing but Christ. And so he's saying now, since you know what your hope will be, since you know that Christ has defeated sin, death, and hell, live now in light of that. Look, I know for many of you, I know when we think about putting limits on sexual pleasure, I know it seems like this is like outdated, and what a dumb thing to be talking about in 2026 in some sense, right? Like that's not really smart. But here's what I would tell you. I know you feel as though something good is being taken from you. That God doesn't want you to have some kind of pleasure. And I want you to know that's just like the flesh-addicted side of your brain talking. That's just the expectations that the world has given you for this life. And Christ came to reset those expectations. Not so that he would take away something that you think is good, but to give you something that is beyond what you could ask or imagine. Infinitely better, because it lasts infinitely. And the resurrection is that Jesus took on the body to dignify what it means to live in a body. And he kept his body, but he rose victoriously over death through that body. And Jesus now, through that same power, will resurrect you and me. And here's what I know. For some of you, you hate your body. And I just want you to know you're not alone. That's what sin does. Look, I know it changes, the culture changes and shifts on what it's cool to hate your body and want, right? In the last few decades, it's gender. It's like, I don't like my gender, I wish I was this, but I want you to know that we can have a great deal of compassion for any of those people because that's what we're like. In fact, that's the very first story of the Bible. The very first story of the Bible were a man and woman given a body, shameless, without condemnation in the presence of God, and the first thing they thought was, I don't like this, I wish I was something else. And I don't know what yours is. Mine was sports. I mean, it really wasn't sports. It was using sports to feel powerful and successful, but that's another story altogether. But when I had to give that up, I know it seems dumb. I didn't even know how to introduce myself anymore. I was like, hi, I'm Jonathan. And I was and it's so dumb, it's just a game. But I was in a dark place for several years. Because I really believed that thing was like, that was who I hated, I wrestled with God. Right? Ski low. I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. Wish I had a girl and look good and I would call it, right? I hated my life, my body. I wish I was different. I wish I was taller, faster, successful. I wish I was smarter. I wish I was all of those things. And so if you feel that way, on one hand, I want you, you're not crazy. That's what sin does to us. It makes us hate what God's given us. And hear the good news. God will resurrect your body. He's going to restore what's broken. Right? For some of you, that means like physical health. When you immediately think of physical health, like, yes, right? Or just pain and suffering, scars and misery. Your body and life is not meaningless. God will resurrect it. Next. You are members with Christ, united with him forever. God's going to raise the Lord, he's going to raise you. Do you not know, verse 15, that you're members of Christ? And now he's speaking probably in terms that would be helpful for these people in a city where, right, in Corinth, where going to a prostitute would have been thought of as maybe a normal thing for the culture. And he's saying, look, don't you know that now by faith, you're united with Christ? Your fate is his fate. Romans 6, right? In the same way that he was buried and yet resurrected, so now those of us who are baptized in faith are in baptism, buried in his likeness, but will live a new life. And in the same way that Jesus did not stay in the grave, neither will you stay in the waters of baptism, and neither will you by faith stay in the grave either. Don't you know you're united to Christ in every way possible? Would I take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Absolutely not. Don't you know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one with her body? Now you hear that language of glue and covenant, right? You're saying something in your body that's not true. That's what porneia is. It's this idea that, especially when you think of pornography, but this idea through fornication or adultery or lust, it's this idea that I want you to be physically naked, but I'm going to keep my existential clothes on. I want you to be physically naked, but I am going to keep my options open. Now, you should say that from now on, right? If this is you, you should put that language. Tell the person that, hey, I want to use you for physical pleasure, but I'm going to throw you away when I'm done. That's the picture here, is that it's telling a story that's simply not true. And the idea of porneia is this idea that I'm going to use you for something. I'm going to make you be vulnerable physically, but I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to be vulnerable emotionally. I mean, even just think practically. I'm going to benefit from you being naked, but I'm not going to invest myself or be naked emotionally, spiritually, economically, financially. Like, I'm not going to make any of those commitments. I'm not going to be, or even this, like, parentally. It's a way of saying, like, I'm not actually responsible for what happens next. I'm going to use you for this. And notice, that's not how Christ gave himself to you. He says you've been united to him. And in the same way that now you wouldn't think of Christ that way, he says, don't think of your body that Christ has redeemed, that will be resurrected that way either. Verse 17, he who is joined to the Lord becomes now one spirit with him, with the Lord. And this is one of the imperatives in here, verse 18, flee from sexual immorality. Think of it this way, your body is sacred space. It's sacred space. Look at the assumption built into that word, though, the imperative of flee. Just think about that for a moment. Visualize that for a moment. You don't flee from something that's stationary. And you don't flee from something, I don't know, like a train. If a train, you're on the tracks, you don't say, like, flee, run away from the train. No, you say, like, get out of its way, right? What do you flee from? You flee from something that's chasing you. So notice what he's saying about porneia, or this temptation to see the world this way, as a body without consequences, as a body without value, without a future, without meaning. He's saying, run! It's coming after you. This is the powerful picture of the culture here, is that, like, you can't just stop. It's like, I'm going to stop following Jesus today. I'm just going to take a break, and I'll pick up tomorrow where I left off. No, the current is pulling you in a direction. He's saying, run. It's coming after you. Don't flirt with it. Don't negotiate with it. Don't make friends with it. Run. You're not safe. Side note here, whether it's pornography or just like a relational, emotional promiscuity here, I would say this especially, run if you're weak, if you're tired, if you're bored, if you feel like a failure, if you feel any way like susceptible or vulnerable. He's saying, like, especially you, run. Turn around and run the opposite direction. Why? Here's the conclusion. You have been bought with a price. So look at what Christ has done for you. Don't unite yourself in this way to something that would defile the goodness of Christ. Why? Because he has done something for you. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. I know many of you are feeling the weight of that, right? You feel scars right now. You're like stumbling in from a trauma ward, and you feel like, I'm cool, but you're just numb. You're bleeding out your abdomen, but you don't know because God's made you with some stamina here, but like you're harmed. And he's saying, look, this does something, and it defiles what God has done for you. So if God will raise the body, then think about what you do with it now. If God will raise that body, what you do with it now matters eternally. Now, on one hand, that's the scary part, right? He says, like, sexual sin, and many of you in this room know this. either because of things that you've committed or things committed against you. It says that sexual sin harms your body. You carry scars like no other sin. I don't know why. That's just how God made us, right? But here's what it also means. It means that in the same way that those scars seem to go deep, the healing that Christ brings here will even go deeper. The resurrected body will be healed. It will be restored. So friend, sex is not just physical. Sex always joins. Sex is not merely consensual. It is covenantal. And so ask yourself this question, what gives your body, your life, and your eternity meaning and value? And that's especially if right now like you feel like you don't have a purpose, you don't have a future, you don't have a plan. Or maybe you hate your body, you hate your desires, you war against them, and you want to know, how do I get out of this? What can actually give meaning and value to what I'm experiencing right now? And Paul tells us it's very simple, not a thing, but Christ. Christ. Remember what I told you about porneia? That it's a way of, it's trying to have intimacy but without sacrifice. It's like saying, I'm going to use you for this particular thing, but I'm going to keep my options. I'm going to keep my autonomy. Right? I want this intimacy, but I'm not going to sacrifice myself. Notice what he says. He's inviting us to a kind of sacrifice, but he doesn't, right? He doesn't say, do it for your own sake. And so here's the implication, right? You can't have fulfillment, meaningful connection and union without, in some sense, sacrifice, giving up your independence. You can't just transactionally use someone and still gain your independence and come on the other side with intimacy, not with God. But notice what he tells us. Christ has done something. You are not your own because you were bought with a price. And the glory you now have in your body is the glory of one who's been purchased by Christ. Two things I want you to know in this. Number one, I'm a younger brother, so I like hand-me-downs. I'm not afraid of used things. I buy used things. If you see me having something and it looks nice, I probably got it from someone who paid full price for it, and I'm a little brother. I don't care. Right? You dust the new off of it. I get under F's depreciated. And something you learn when you're buying and selling used goods is that people selling used things have no idea what they're worth. They're all salesmen, like, it's worth this, it's worth this. And here's what you learn in the whole hand-me-down, secondhand market. A thing is only worth what someone will pay for it, period. And here is what I can encourage you with. That is existentially true. A thing is worth what someone will pay for it. And the God of the universe demonstrated his love for you and for me, that while you and I were yet sinners, he gave his son. He gave his son. Just stop and think about what that means, that you're worth in the eyes of God. Just think, like, I'm worth what was paid for me. You were bought with a price. Here's the second thing I want you to know about that. Remember what I told you? The implications here is that you can't have intimacy without, holding on to your independence. Here's the gospel. That's exactly what God offered. It's as if God couldn't have intimacy without us. God couldn't have intimacy with us and also gain his independence and also, hold on to his independence. And you notice what he did? He became naked. He became weak. He became vulnerable. He hung on an old rugged cross. For what purpose? To restore us to himself. In just a moment, we're going to respond with a symbolic act of faith. We're going to be invited to a table to take communion. I can't think of a better time or place than in the context of this verse to do that. If you wonder what is communion, it's there. This is the price. This is what the God of the universe was willing to pay. The body of Christ broken for you. The blood of Christ, that is his very lifeblood, his very self poured out for you. Why? For what purpose? To purchase you back. That's atonement language. To redeem us back to himself. To set us on a trajectory, a new story and journey, one of value and purpose, one that has a happy ending. And the God of the universe was willing to pay life and limb for it. At the cross, he gave, in the most naked and vulnerable way possible, himself. So he's saying, now, glorify God with your body in that. So notice a few chapters later, and he gives us the picture of this. That means the invitation for us is twofold. If this morning, if this seems foreign to you, this seems too good to be true, then the invitation for you this morning is not to take communion. The elements are for baptized, repenting believers in Jesus. It would be a symbol of something that's not true. And so the New Testament doesn't call us to believe and take communion. It calls us to believe and be baptized. And so if that's for you, receive Jesus this morning. Forget the elements for a minute. Just receive Jesus. The elements are just a picture of Jesus. This morning, receive Jesus. In faith, I believe, I want this. I long for this. I need this. But for the rest of us, maybe you've heard this story and you need to be renewed by it. Maybe you feel the weight, right? You feel the weight of your own sin, the grossness of your own, right? The things you've done with your own body, or the things that have been done to you. Then hear this, come to the table and hear the affirming words of God. This is what I would give for you. Receive it. Come to this table. See what I would pay. See what I would give to give you a new life and a future. A few chapters later, he says the way that we come to the table is by preparing and examining ourselves. So I'm going to invite us to do that. Would you do me a favor? Right where you are, would you bow your head and begin to pray with me? He says, examine yourself. One of the best ways to do that is to simply confess to God what's true. Wherever you are in this room, the God of the universe has made himself vulnerable, given up his autonomy and independence in Christ, so that now, by faith, we can come to him and he hears our prayers. Jesus advocates for us that our prayers would be brought directly to God. So here's what I can tell you. Just right now, say what's true. Please don't let this moment go to waste. Say to God what's true. Even if it's, I don't believe this. He's the one person in all of existence that won't be shocked by that. He won't be bothered by it. Be honest. This fills me with shame. This fills me with regret. Be honest. I feel like I'm losing something here, right? All right. This is going to cost me if I actually believe this. I'm going to have to move out from living with XYZ. I'm going to have to stop living. I know. Say that to the Lord. Just say what's true. He's the one person who won't be shocked. And he's the one person who always receives and responds in grace. And he says to you and to me, whatever we bring, you're bought with a price. You're worth more than that to me. And so now in your heart, would you fix your eyes on repentance and faith? Whatever that is for you. Maybe you're not a believer. This is a place where you say, I'm going to trust. I'm going to believe this. This is so good. I want it. Even now, turn from other ways of being. Say, I trust you, Jesus. And for those of us who have trusted in Jesus, we get to look to the table and be reminded. Oh, my soul, don't forget. Don't forget. This is what was given. Holy Spirit, thank you that you have united us to the Father and you are with us now to guide our next steps. Help us respond in faith and obedience, knowing that our life has purpose and meaning. Our body is not a waste. Instead, it is a treasure that the God of the universe emptied heaven with Jesus to purchase. Help us to receive that with faith, to receive the elements, to receive Jesus. Because it's in his name that we ask all these things. Amen.